J.D. Vance's vision of not only what you can do, I mean, my God, I don't know why I'm saying this, when you're menstruating, like what the flip, right? And then we're going to further, so we can't have reproductive health care then. And then when you're postmenopausal, you're just going to go, sit with your grandchildren and I guess your golden years. It's just so beyond, and I think so threatening to women, to that, I feel like 1700s vision of the world or something.
All right, and we are back with Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill. She's a Democrat from New Jersey. She's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, former U.S. Navy helicopter pilot, and former prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be here.
Welcome. First timer. I think you're a member of the unofficial Congressional Bulwark Caucus. Bill Kristol floated you for VP, I think. So you're among friends.
Me.
I don't know if were you vetted? Did you get any vetting papers from the campaign?
I did not get vetting papers.
Okay. No. Well, if they just listened to Bill Kristol more, maybe you would. We just talked to Dean Phillips. I don't want to dwell too much on the past because we're not going back, but I just think it's worth revisiting very briefly. On July 9th, you called on the president to step aside. It was a key moment. It was when some Jerry Nadler just backtracked, I believe, at the moment. So I'm just wondering what that decision was like, the social stigma, why you decided to do it.
Yeah, it's certainly, I think, in seeing the debate, so many of the concerns that people had been expressing to me that we'd been hearing about and been seeing in the polling, as you recall, before Biden's debate, we weren't in a really strong place. And I was even hearing from some of our NATO allies, I don't think you guys are taking this presidential election as seriously as you need to be. We're seeing some excitement on the right that we're not sensing in the Democratic Party. And I think a lot of us I felt that when people really had a decision to make, when they were able to really sit down and think about the difference between what Trump represented and his presidency and his ideals and values versus what Biden had accomplished and his values and ideals, they would choose Biden. And I thought the debate would maybe be that inflection point when Biden could sort of lay out his views and we could hear from Trump. And I had spoken to people beforehand about their concerns. And I said, no, we're team normal. We just need to kind of express our values. And I think the American people will understand that that's the path forward. And after that debate, I think I realized, like so many people, that there wasn't then an inflection point. We weren't going to see that path forward. And we were seeing the energy building on the right in a really concerning way. Not only were we coming to the conclusion that, unfortunately, the Biden campaign could not marshal the effort that was needed to prosecute the case against Trump and was not going to win that election. But then at the same time, we were seeing a precipitous fall in polling in House races across the country, which, as you can imagine, is very important to me. So that was a really big moment. I think it takes time to process that. I knew at the end of the day that as someone who served this country for decades and cares deeply about this country and the values of America, I knew Biden would make the right choice. So I think it was it was a decision at first to step back and say, okay, let's allow the president to process this. But of course, by the next week, I think maybe that was giving the wrong impression that everyone, that we didn't have another path forward, that there was no plan, no strategy to do that. And as we started to see that kind of shutting down of discussion, shutting down of how we were going to actually defeat Trump, and I wasn't hearing any plan to do that or any change in strategy, anything to me that spoke of our willingness to attack and address this campaign in a strategic way. I said to people, I'm not willing to cede to Trump in July. So at that point, I decided it was time to come out publicly. And I think that, Nancy Pelosi is so strategic. I think doing so opened up a little bit of space for her to say the next day, look, we need the president to make a decision, and kind of opening up the conversation again.
Part of being team normal is you've got to be responsible. Being team normal is also being team responsible, and I think that there was some irresponsibility about going blindly, into potential Trumpian autocracy, just because you don't want to walk on eggshells. And that another example of that was with your colleague from New Jersey, Bob Menendez, right? Like we've seen from the Republicans, from Team Abnormal, a total unwillingness to ostracize or to push aside or to criticize people that act irresponsibly or act corrupt within their own caucus. And I think that, over the summer, both with the kind of this open conversation about Biden and I think a pretty clear voice among Democrats that what Senator Menendez did was unacceptable, I think was a sign of health. So I might have been a little tougher for you, but being from New Jersey, how did you see the Menendez situation?
I'm not just, represented from New Jersey. I'm also someone who has served in the military, has taken oaths to the Constitution, has served around the world. And I can tell you what so offended me about Senator Menendez's conduct was that he blithely put people in danger overseas. As the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, giving information to Egypt about our embassy staff, among many other things that crossed a line, that one was so offensive to me, that you could put people serving our country in danger overseas for your own personal benefit. And so I not only had called on Senator Menendez to resign after the indictment came out, but also have put forth a piece of legislation that people that have been indicted on certain crimes should not have any access to our nation's secrets, to secret material. And I think that would include Trump as well, of course. So that was something that was important to me. No, it did not feel like, it felt like a very black and white type situation to come forward and call for him to step aside, to call for Menendez to do that as well. And I think you're exactly right. To me, this, we've had, people would kind of throw some shade on the Democratic Party a little bit. Oh, Republicans are strong. Republicans support their candidate. Republicans, right, are not divided. Republicans would never. I've heard some people say, this is awful. I've heard people saying Republicans would just support their candidate at all costs. And I think, well, that's why we're not Republicans. That's ridiculous. Like when you're supporting your candidate at all costs, to me, that seems to indicate, and what we've seen is there has been no accountability for January 6th. No discussion in the Republican Party that their standard bearer has tried to stay in office despite a Democratic election. No discussion about that. That's jaw-dropping to me.
Yes. Being in a cult is not strong, actually. Being a cult member is a sign of weakness. No offense to any cult members out there listening. All right, that's in the past. So we're in the coconut grove. We don't need to dwell on all that too much. So I want to look forward at the campaign ahead of us. You've been out as a surrogate for the Harris Walz ticket. Some new audio from J.D. Vance was circulating yesterday. Let's listen to that together. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
And you can sort of see the effect it has on him to be around them. Like they spoil him. There's sort of all the classic stuff that grandparents do to grandchildren. But it makes him a much better human being to have exposure to his grandparents.
Well, I don't know.
And the evidence on this, by the way, is like super clear.
That's the whole purpose of the postmenopausal female in theory. Did your in-laws, and particularly your mother-in-law, show up in some huge way?
She lived with us for a year.
Right.
So,
So I didn't know the answer to that.
Right. No,
because that's this weird unadvertised feature of marrying an Indian woman.
So it's in some ways the most transgressive thing I've ever done against sort of the hyper neoliberal approach to work and family.
What is happening there?
If I tried to sell to my mother or my mother-in-law that the whole purpose of the postmenopausal woman was to care for my children, I think they would have my head. And I mean, what the hell, right? Like, what is happening there? That is so bizarre. And I think what's so interesting about this is, somebody told me, I'm in northern New Jersey. We work with a lot of people on Wall Street and stuff. And I said, I don't understand why when Trump goes out to Wildwood, New Jersey and starts talking about Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs and acting like it's a documentary, not some sort of work of fiction, like, what the hell? And he said, well, Trump's craziness is sort of priced into the market, right? Yeah. That's how they speak. Right. Like, it's priced in. Like, people sort of accept it, they know it, and they're just moving on. I would suggest that J.D. Vance's abnormalities are not priced in, and that he is now tipping the scales on that ticket and making people really assess, is this who we want in charge of our country? Do we not only want to have to deal with a Trump presidency, which is horrible in its own right, but then adding on to that, this new generation of crazy people in J.D. Vance and what he signifies. And then you take it, and what's been so wonderful for Democrats is it's in such sharp contrast to the campaign that Harris and Walz are running. I mean, here you have, not really just Team Normal. We'd accept Team Normal. That would probably do it for a lot of Americans. But actually Team Vision. I mean, a group, two people who really care deeply about the country, who've served the country almost their entire lives, and then have a vision for the future that I think is really compelling and exciting and invigorating and reminds us of who we are as Americans. It is such a good contrast, I think, and I'm so excited personally about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you haven't heard from Tim Walz anything like talking about how his mother-in-law's race makes her genetically predisposed to being a good rearer of grandchildren. It's just like, it's just all so weird. It's just like, it's a normal thought. Hey, I think it was cool my mother-in-law came to help. My mother-in-law came to help. And instead of saying that, talking about what postmenopausal women have to do, and like and there seems to be
their role.
Their role. There seems to be a lot of thought put into on JD Vance's part, like what women should do with their bodies.
Yes, and their time and their freedom. Yeah. No, it's a really scary thing, and I think that's what's so threatening. I hear all the time, well, Mikie, is abortion really going to be something that you talk about in New Jersey? Because New Jersey has good reproductive freedom laws. And, when we look across the country at what's happening, it feels so incredibly threatening to women. And then when you're a mom, and my daughter's joined the military, and I know there's 140,000 service members. That doesn't even include their family members down in Texas, for example, which is ranked 49th in reproductive health. And so when my daughter and other women are there, they don't have access to good reproductive care. And so as a woman, you just start to feel like the walls are closing in on you. J.D. Vance's vision of not only what you can do when, my God, I don't know why I'm saying this, when you're menstruating, like what the flip, right? And then we're going to further, so we can't have reproductive health care then. And then when you're postmenopausal, you're just going to go, sit with your grandchildren and I guess your golden years. It's just so beyond. And I think so threatening to women, to that kind of, I feel like 1700s vision of the world or something.
Yeah. As a male candidate, just a pro tip, like you have to have a really good reason to discuss menstruation, like just a really, really good one. Like sometimes, there's relevant policies, but not just flip. Given you mentioned your service, your daughter's service, which we honor and we're grateful for. Obviously, people's service is now coming into question in the campaign with regards to JD Vance. He's going after Tim Walz, which we've been discussing here. How have you kind of reacted to JD's attacks and how Walz has pushed back on him this week?
It's just so infuriating, and especially because it's such a reminder to me of a particular moment in my life. I had just finished my service in the Navy and was getting out of the Navy after almost 10 years. And coming home, I'd been overseas in my last duty station. So I was coming home and waiting to go to law school. And that summer, is when the Swift boat attacks came out against John Kerry. And to sort of have just been in the military and to have been, I knew I worked for Vietnam vets. I know you're saying, no, Mikie, you're too young. No, I really did. And
I was thinking that.
Oh, no, you were. I'm being facetious. But no, work for Vietnam vets. I remember an admiral I worked for had bullet wounds, bullet scars up and down his arms because of his work as a swift boat captain. And McCain, you know, and his POW experience was something that was taught to people at the Naval Academy when I was there, and how brave he was in refusing to be released because he knew that that was just a ploy by the Vietnamese to try to undermine the morale of other POWs. Right. And to then see that John Kerry's service like that was a reason to attack him. Not just that the service wasn't something that we were honoring, but was an actual reason people were attacking him. And that La Civita was using that as an attack point was just so beyond offensive to me and beyond the pale. And I couldn't believe that the American people sort of accepted that. And then to see now this starting again with Walz's service, somebody who served for 24 years, you know, though a lot of people haven't served in the military or maybe aren't familiar, but a 20-year term of service is a general retirement, right. 20 years. So the fact that he served for 24 years in the National Guard, and, you know, has, I think we've seen in other areas in his life where he's such a great public service. And then he got out, not to just retire and hang out down the shore with his family, but to actually then go into Congress and get on the Veterans Committee so he could further advocate for veterans. I just, to have that all attacked, to have that life of service attacked, not for any other reason than because he's a veteran and served so well, I just find so incredibly offensive. And then you combine that with Trump, right? You combine that with him saying stuff like people who serve are suckers and losers, and denigrating John McCain and denigrating Gold Star families, refusing to get out of his car to honor the graves of World War I, people who died in World War I, saying he didn't want to be seen with disabled veterans. I mean, it's just really incredibly offensive.
Couldn't agree more. You're as we speak about not going back, looking to the future. You are, I think, strongly considering a run for governor there in New Jersey. And so my first question when I heard that is, are you doing that just to get away from the House Republican colleagues, or is there some other reason that you're thinking about it?
So I was in that class of 2018, the first group of people to run in that midterm after Trump had gotten into office. And I remember at that time, you know, there were quite a few veterans running at that time. And I now serve with some of those great veterans like Chrissy Houlihan and Jason Crow. Yeah. And then people like Abigail Spanberg and Alyssa Slatkin, who are in national service as well. Yeah.
And also part of the unofficial Bulwark Caucus, but you know, you can continue.
Okay, great. I love this caucus. There was this constituent of mine goes, you know, all you guys are crazy because you know what? When everyone else is running away from a crisis, you're all running towards the crisis. You veterans are crazy. Yeah. And that sort of struck me because that was what compelled me to run and what compelled those, you know, that group of people to run. Abigail and Alyssa and Christy and Jason and myself, we'd not been in elected office. I don't think we had thought of running for elected office before Trump was elected. It really was that desire to serve our country at a time when we thought our country was really facing exigent circumstances. That has continued to this day. So while, yes, I cannot, I don't think I can make a compelling argument that the House of Representatives is running beautifully or that it's a lovely place to be or, you know, I can say that I'm incredibly proud to be there right now because we need to make sure our democratic institutions continue to work and continue to function. And it's hard and it's not pretty. And there are a lot of people in the Freedom Caucus who would just like to collapse the whole thing. But it's really important to have people who are down there serving day in and day out and making sure that our House of Representatives continues to deliver. So that was a really long way of saying, no, that's not why I'm fleeing from the House of Representatives. I'm really, really proud to be there. But I do think our governors across the country have been doing really great things and connecting really well with the people. And I think when we hear so many times, oh, Mikie, the Democratic Party just doesn't communicate well. We don't connect with people. I think that's true, but it's not because of our policies. It's not because of our values. It's because sometimes I think of the way we talk. And maybe one of the best things I thought Kamala Harris did was when Trump said, oh, first she was Indian and then she was black and blah, blah, blah. And she didn't even take the bait, right? Yeah. We're so, oh my gosh, as Democrats, we take the bait all the time, right? She was just totally like, I'm not even, like, seriously, I'm not going there. And I think governors are much better at just staying focused on, as Gretchen Whitmer would say, fixing the damn roads. Like, what is happening in people's lives and how do we just address it? And so that's really compelling to me.
Well, as you look at it, I know you got to go, but I've got to do my centrist former Republican pilled thing and ask you, as you look to potentially run for governor, if you look at the blue states, is there anything out there that you're like, I think our side could do this a little bit better. I don't know if we've hit the mark on this issue or that topic. Is there anything that kind of stands out as something that the blue states have been missing?
Well, I think the governors are getting a lot of it. I would say sometimes the Washington Democratic Party doesn't always get the legislation, but I think you often see our governors understanding it better. So, for example, I would say we need comprehensive immigration reform. We do need to understand who's coming across our southern border and what. I mean, I'm on the Committee for Strategic Competition with China, with the Chinese Communist Party, and the precursor chemicals to fentanyl are being pushed into Mexico so they can be shoved up through the southern border. And we need high-end machines to track that. We need more processing ability. If you don't want people, and I don't want people certainly, incarcerated for months while they're waiting to be processed at our southern border, if you don't, want bad outcomes there, we need more resources at our southern border. We need more people. We need more processing. We need more judges. We need more fentanyl machines, et cetera. So I think that's one area where the governors are getting it. I'm not sure that in Washington that is as understood, although the Senate, I think, did a very, very hard work to try to get to an agreement on comprehensive reform. I'd also say that there are too many bright lines in Washington for Democrats. You have to take this hardcore position, or you have to take this hardcore position. I think we have to really come up with an energy solution. We have to address permitting reform, not just at the federal level, but at the state level.
Now that's why you're in the Bulwark Caucus, permitting reform.
Right,
you hit
right.
It.
We are not going to build, the energy outcomes of tomorrow if we don't get on permitting reform. And even infrastructure. I was just speaking to someone at Amtrak who was saying, France, and I don't think France is a bastion of right-wing conservatism, builds their infrastructure at such a lower cost than the United States. So if we're really going to build the infrastructure of tomorrow in rail, and certainly in our energy infrastructure, we have got to look at permitting reform and how much it costs to build things here in this country. So that's another key area. I could probably go on.
That's great.
We're
over
all
already.
the time, but we're at time. We're at time.
You nailed it. Come on back soon. I had so much more to get to. I love hearing from you. Congressman Mikie Sherrill coming at us from, I think, an indoor ski slope in New Jersey, a very New Jersey experience. We don't know anything about this in Colorado.
Walk. Yeah, that's where we're at.
We appreciate you. We'll be talking soon.